This offseason looks like it will be a defining one for Miami, and we'll talk more about the future of Tyler Herro, Jimmy Butler, and more. And we offer an explanation for fans as to why the front office has to consider Jimmy's future and why we don't get to make those decisions. Plus, we answer your questions about the team on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, it's credentialed Heat media member David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, the fast-paced game that lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. Download Monopoly Go now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. I've started the last two conversations we've had about Jimmy Butler, David, and I've gotten into some trouble with our listeners, so I'm just going to go ahead and let you start today because I know that there are some things that you have to say that we're gonna talk through this. So just go ahead. I'm handing it to you.
Yeah, it's just an open-ended conversation here, and that's the way it should be. Because right now, nothing is set. Let's make that clear. Nothing is set. Nobody knows anything. We don't know anything. We're offering our opinions on what we think the Heat are open to considering, and they have to consider every possibility when it comes to Jimmy Butler. I think a lot of people misinterpret the perspectives that we've given over the last couple of days following Pat Riley's press conference and whatever conflict there may be with Jimmy Butler regarding his contract extension. This isn't our personal choice. I think both you and I, if we were asked as hosts of this show, we would love to cover a team with a superstar and better than a team without one. That makes things much easier, makes things much better, et cetera, in terms of generating traffic and everything else that you have to consider. But even just from the idea of covering this team is better with Jimmy Butler and has been over time. That's not what we're arguing here. The idea is that the front office has to make a choice regarding Jimmy Butler's future and the fact that he's becoming older and less available with every passing day. And that's a concern for this team because their goal ultimately is to always win a championship. Would I like to trade Jimmy Butler? No, it's not my decision either, but I don't want Jimmy Butler traded from this team, and neither do you. You just want to be able to see this team advance as far as they can. And Jimmy's future with that team makes it less likely that they could advance, not because of his level of his play over the last 5 years, but because of his level of his play over the next 3 years. And that's a concern for the team as well. Now, that's not to preclude them from looking at other exploratory deals. And that's something that we'll consider as well. We'll talk about this throughout today's show. But when you're looking at what to improve on this roster, and a lot of people are saying, why are you all trading Jimmy Butler? Again, not our decision. Why are you all trading Jimmy Butler and not Tyler Herro? Because Tyler Herro is not Jimmy Butler and not as good as Jimmy Butler. And because if you open up a trade for Tyler Herro, we saw last year as Portland fans were basically laughing at Heat media and Heat fandom alike for saying, why don't you want Tyler Herro? It's like, well, because Tyler is not that level of a player, because Tyler is much more replaceable around the league than a guy like Jimmy Butler, even at age 34.
Right.
And so if you're looking at the next potential moves for Miami in order to improve their roster, yes, they'll shop Tyler and Nikola Jovic, and Jaime Jaquez and anybody else that they have and draft picks and everything that's available to them, but one that'll leave the roster depleted, and it's not exactly the clear path to title contention, but with the team and Jimmy at an impasse regarding the contract extension, there's only so many different possibilities, which we've outlined over the last couple of shows. The fact that many of you are selectively hearing and picking and choosing what we say in order to attack us for opinions about the team and what they might or might not do is more about you all than
it's
us.
It's an emotional thing, and I get it. People are attached to Jimmy Butler. He is the team star. Everybody here is attached to Jimmy Butler. You and I love Jimmy Butler. We love talking to Jimmy Butler. We love that he's part of that locker room. Jimmy Butler is a superstar. He's a great personality. He's such a unique person. I look forward to Media Day because of Jimmy Butler, not because of the empty platitudes that all the other players are going to offer, right? On a Media Day. We want to play at a faster pace. Okay, cool. So the other 29 teams. People think that I want Jimmy Butler traded because yesterday I said that I expect him to get traded. And that could not be further from the truth. this is me coming to grips with what can happen. And I have, since yesterday's episode, David, gotten so many text message and Twitter replies and comments and things like that. Literally, people texting me, do you really think this is going to happen? And I said, I don't know. I'm not reporting this. And I said yesterday, I'm not reporting anything. Anybody that says they know what's going to happen is lying. Nobody knows what's going to happen. You want to know why? Because the Miami Heat don't know what's going to happen. And Jimmy Butler doesn't know what's going to happen. This isn't scripted, man. Like, this thing's got to play out. Negotiations have to happen. Right. Things change. Pat Riley says something explosive during a press conference. Jimmy Butler has yet to respond to that. He might not. He might. I don't know. All I know is that they haven't gotten into a room together yet to discuss their future. And Jimmy Butler wants one thing. We know that because they've basically reported it. And the Miami Heat want a different thing. And we know that because Pat Riley just told it to us on Monday. Yeah. And so right now, the star player and the organization want two different things. So for anybody to sit here and say there's no way Jimmy Butler gets traded and Jimmy Butler's future is there's no problems with it, like, you have to consider all possibilities when you have two sides at opposite ends of a spectrum here. And that's where they are right now. And that's all I'm saying. And so when I get here yesterday and say, hey man, like, I expect Jimmy Butler to get traded, that's me coming to grips with the fact that I saw Dwayne Wade leave in 2016 when I didn't think it was going to happen. I remember getting on a radio show for an interview. The host asked me, do you think Dwayne Wade's going to get traded? Or I'm sorry, do you think Dwayne Wade's going to leave? And I said, there is absolutely zero chance Dwayne Wade leaves. And within hours, Dwayne Wade left. I was dead wrong about that. And I might be dead wrong about this too. I'm just saying, based on the tea leaves and what I'm looking at in the situation and with the scenario that's ahead of Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat and the obstacles that are there and the things that they have to hurdle through and over, I'm struggling to find a scenario where everybody comes together at the end of this and is happy and Jimmy Butler is happily playing for the Miami Heat next season. Again, I would love to be wrong about that. I would love to be wrong about that. But
I think people
can't
are
ignore
confusing
that
the steps here too. Yeah.
And I can't ignore that. And then also, not just me, but Pat Riley saying his level of frustration at that media press conference. Zach Lowe, Brian Windhorst, Howard Beck, respected national voices, all telling you over the last few days, watch the Heat. Watch this situation with Jimmy Butler. This is not something that we are making up. We are just laying it out for you and all the possibilities that are out there because nothing is decided yet and everything has to be considered, even something as painful and maybe otherworldly to some people as imagining Jimmy Butler in a 76ers jersey again or a Houston Rockets jersey or something crazy. I never thought I would see Dwayne Wade in a Chicago Bulls jersey or a Cleveland Cavaliers jersey, but it happened. I didn't think LeBron was going to leave in 2014, but it happened. I didn't think the Heat were going to trade for Jimmy Butler in 2019. And then that happened, right? Like, I mean, you know what I mean. But, like, weird stuff happens, man. Like, this is the NBA, you know?
Right.
Like,
and look, and to say, it's not that we aren't considering other potential moves that the team could make. Obviously, the team would love to say they could acquire X superstar, Kevin Durant, Donovan Mitchell, plug in any name that you think fits as a superstar in order to bolster Jimmy and Bam and cruise to a championship. That path is not likely to happen. And I think that's what people are kind of forgetting. They explored that path last summer.
Before that.
And the year before that. And the year before that, they made what they thought was going to be the big seminal move to change his team by adding PJ Tucker and Kyle Lowry.
And it was
the first seed of the Eastern Conference.
That was
a shot away from
that was
NBA
Miami's
finals.
best chance. I think even though they didn't actually make the finals and they were in two other finals, I think they could have beaten the Warriors that year. We've talked about that. That was their chance, right?
Yes, it was.
And this team has had other chances, but I thought that was their best chance. And and maybe that's it. And I said, like, the window's closed because I don't think that this construction of the team works anymore with Jimmy Butler as your number one scorer. It doesn't mean that a team with Jimmy Butler can't win the championship. I just think that this current construction, the way that they've gone about the last two regular seasons, isn't going to work. They need dramatic changes in order to open up the championship window again. And maybe that's a star player. I just don't know how they get that. To your point, David, like, people keep asking us, like, well, what about Tyler Herro? And it's, well, Tyler Herro's not up for an extension. That's why we're not, it's not either or. The Tyler Herro, I don't know why people think that the Tyler Herro situate, like his status on the roster is in any way related to Jimmy Butler's status on the roster. It's two different players in two completely different situations. Jimmy Butler is up for a very lucrative contract extension that, if he gets what he wants, would make him the 8th highest paid player in the NBA. That's what we're talking about over here in the Jimmy Butler world. And the Tyler Herro world, there are real other decisions that the Heat have to make about Tyler Herro we are going to talk about.
Yeah,
right?
They will explore trading him just like they did last year and the year before.
There's a chance that both of them are back next year, and there's a really good chance that none of them are back. Neither of them are back next year. It's not an either or situation. So when people are like, they just want Tyler, you guys just want to keep Tyler Herro, I'm like, how these things are not related, even a little bit. Not even a little bit. We're going to keep talking about this next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's show is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. And now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses. That's Yahoo Finance. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. So the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and whatever other investments you might have. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you've got the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor. That's yahoofinance.com. The #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. We are still here 5 days a week providing off-season content. Let's just bring it down a notch, David, because I feel like you and I are almost getting to the point of being argumentative with our fans.
No. I respect their passion and their fandom and everything else like that. But I think, look, it's the nature of the medium. You don't hear the show in its entirety, or you hear a snippet of it, or you see it on social media, and next thing you know, you run away with all these kind of conclusions, and it detracts from the overall picture that we've been trying to paint since the end of the season. It's been a week. The Heat lost to the Celtics that last Wednesday, and we're recording this on a Wednesday afternoon, less than a week ago. And since then, we've said, look, the team was in a fine place. They struggled during the regular season. Jimmy missed time. Tyler missed time. Lots of players missed time. If there was a path for this franchise to build a contender, this is what has to happen. And we talked about exploring a trade for Tyler, exploring a trade for Jimmy and Bam, and those aren't realistic options, at least in terms of Bam Adebayo. Like it's less likely that you trade Jimmy Butler than it is Tyler Herro. We can admit that. That's absolutely fine. But if you're looking at a clear path to retooling this roster and acquiring as many assets as you want in order to go get a superstar, Tyler Herro is not getting it done. And I think we people have to understand that that's what we've been saying since day one. It's not that we're preferring one option or the other. Although I will ask this: if you had your druthers, what moves would you like Miami to make? If you had to rank, like in order of whatever moves Miami could make, which move would you prefer they make?
Before I answer that, I just want to say quickly, I got stuck in the reporting circle last year with the Damian Lillard stuff, and everybody told you that they knew what was going to happen with Damian Lillard, and then nobody was right about it.
That's true.
So people keep that in mind this summer when everything's going on. Nobody knows what's going to happen until it happens, right? There's not a script. Nobody's hiding anything from you. Nothing happens until it happens, and when it happens, then we figure it, and then we find out what happened. I'm going to make it very clear this summer when I'm reporting something and when I'm not. And I'm going to try to report less, probably, because last year was so confusing and so frustrating and so miserable from so many perspectives. I will try to read tea leaves, and I'll try to do all that stuff, and I'll try to tell you what I think. Like, I think that Jimmy Butler might have played his last game in a Heat jersey. That's just it's just what I think is going to happen, just based on how I understand the CBA and the Miami Heat's cap situation and what Jimmy Butler wants and what Miami wants, whatever. Yesterday I was not reporting anything, and I think people get that very confused. So there's that. In terms of what I want to happen, go get a guy who can play 70+ games and score 26 points per game in the regular season. Because I'm sick of being in the play-in tournament, and I'm sick of watching this team be unavailable and unhealthy every single year. Last year wasn't an exception. Last year was the rule. This team has been injured for 3 years now.
Yeah.
Just limping into every single game. And I watch a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder this year, and they have their dudes available every single night. That is fun as a fan. Oh, the best players are available every night? That's cool. I get to watch
What a novel idea.
What a novel idea, right? Like that's what it should be. Like teams don't deal with as many injuries as the Miami Heat do, and that's why Pat Riley spent 98% of his press conference talking about availabilities, because he wants this too. That's what he wants. The Heat did not have a single player in the top 40 in scoring in points per game this year in a league of 30 teams. They didn't have anybody in the top, to be even more specific, 44. Nobody in the top 44 in scoring in the NBA. That is almost impossible. This team made the playoffs. I have no idea how when I look at some of these stats. Right? Like you hear something like that and you're like, okay, so they're picking number 1 in the draft this year? And that's not the case. And I just want to see somebody go out there and score 26 points per game on a nightly basis and just carry this offense. Just
make things easier.
Yeah.
Not have to work possession after possession. Like it's not
have to be in the play-in tournament.
Yeah. It's not that Miami plays at this ridiculously slow pace or anything like that. It's just they have to work the shot clock for 20 seconds in order to get
a Haywood Highsmith post up. I don't want to watch it anymore. I love Haywood Highsmith. He's a defender, a corner 3-point shooter. I don't want to see him isolating against Jason Tatum in a freaking playoff game. I'm sick of it, David. I'm sorry. It's not fun basketball. I look at teams like that of Shea and Luka and Anthony Edwards, and I'm like, yeah, I want that. I want that excitement. I want that level of scoring. I want that level of winning that just hasn't been here in the regular season for 2 years now.
You got to taste it game 2, right? You got to taste it game 2 against Boston when they shot better than they have all season long, and half the roster was hurt or whatever, and they somehow managed to pull this incredible offensive display, and Boston crapped the bed completely defensively. So I wonder that was not the case.
I think there's a world where Jimmy Butler slides down into that number 2 role, right? And then that bumps Bam Adebayo down into a number 3 role. Obviously, you would need to get a new number 1 in that sense.
That's fair.
The problem with that, and I think that trio, depending on who the number 1 is, and by the way, if whoever that number, it actually doesn't. If they're good enough to be the number 1 on a team with Jimmy and Bam, then that player is really damn good. And so whatever. So that number 1 player, Jimmy is the number 2, Bam is the number 3. Because I think we're past the point of Jimmy being able to be a number 1. We're just past it. He's going to be 35 years old in the regular season. This is Dwayne Wade 2013, 2014, right? Still a really good player. Jimmy Butler, still a very good player, even going into his age 35 season, but not capable of being that number 1 guy. Dwayne Wade had LeBron James. Jimmy Butler needs to find his LeBron James. Bam Adebayo has to be Chris Bosh, where it's like big shot Bosh. Just hit a couple big shots every once in a while. We'll be happy. And people are talking about aggressive Bam less often. The thing is with the big 3 Heat, LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh all gave up money to play together.
Yeah.
And that was in a separate CBA where they were able to sign Shane Battier and Mike Miller. And I don't need to get into all the second tax apron stuff, but that team probably wouldn't have been able to have Shane Battier and Mike Miller and Chris Anderson and all those, and Ray Allen. Like that team wouldn't have been able to have those guys. But that's a whole other point, and we'll push that aside for now. But with Jimmy Butler being extension eligible and wanting that extension, if he takes less money, there is a world where the Heat would be able to afford a new number 1 that pushes Jimmy down to a number 2 and Bam down to a number 3. I just question whether or not Jimmy Butler is going to do that, because every chance he's had an opportunity to take less money, he hasn't done it.
He has not.
And especially if there's a team like Philadelphia out there making it very clear through the media that they're going to probably be willing to give Jimmy Butler that extension if somehow he got traded there, then I do wonder if Jimmy Butler's like, well, I can either go to Philadelphia, who are as much a title contender as the Miami Heat are as currently constructed, right? I think I can win there. I get along with Joel Embiid, all these things. Nick Nurse is a good coach, and make all the money. or I could stay here and take less money.
Yep.
And it'd be up to the Heat to be like, well, if you take less money, this is the thing that we're going to do to go get that player. And as you've already pointed out several times, David, that's not a guarantee because the Heat tried to trade Tyler Herro and picks and young players for Damian Lillard or Donovan Mitchell. Now, maybe they can do it this year. It's possible. I'm not going to close the door on anything. But there's a lot of just sort of like balls up in the air, right? Like you're juggling kind of like all these different kind of what ifs.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I think for Jimmy to stay in Miami, it would take a hometown discount. Now, he just told our friend Rohan Nadkarni from GQ.
Thank you. I'm glad you're
wants to stay
in
Miami. I just don't. He didn't go so far as to say, I'll take less money to stay in Miami.
Those things are incongruous. That's the whole thing. It's
right.
like you cannot say one thing and then act or have your agent leak out that you want something incongruous with what you're saying. Like, I love Miami, but you better pay me $60 million a year at 37 in order to stay here. It's like, well, you can't have it both ways. And it just doesn't work that way. If you want to win a title, if you want this team to go into, the promised land of title contention, aside from what you've been able to do, and it's been incredible work over the last 5 years. So, I mean, look, I have more pro player than almost every media member you speak to, and I will always say, go and get your money. And I love that about players and the ability to control their fates. But you have to make decisions from both sides. And which is why I don't have a problem with free agency either. I didn't have a problem with Dwayne leaving in 2016. I didn't have a problem with LeBron leaving in 2014. I didn't have a problem with even KD leaving Oklahoma City when I was covering the Thunder. Like, I had no problem with these things. Like, you have to make decisions in order to preserve what you view as your legacy and whether or not your family will be financially secure. And believe me, and I've said it before, the numbers that we hear are not the numbers that the players wind up with. In fact, if you hear a contract and the total amount, a player might get 40% of that if they're lucky. So consider that. So I have no problem. And I don't care if you were talking about, I am also more pro labor than most media members when it comes to a player versus ownership. All the way. Take the billionaires for everything they're worth. I don't have any problem saying that, and I will continue to say that. But again, you cannot have it both ways. If you want to stay in Miami, if you want to win a title in Miami, you're going to have to take less.
And that has nothing to do with, to your point, Mickey Arison, what Jimmy Butler is worth, and what we think Mickey Arison might be willing to pay. That's because of the salary cap. That's because of what is allowed under the salary cap. And you have it's not baseball. You have a finite amount of resources, and how you divvy those resources up determines whether or not you're a team that's stacked like the Boston Celtics.
Right.
Or
if there's one thing, then you can say that if there's one point, then you can also say, well, you know what? This is on Mickey. Like, he should pay the second tax or whatever is possible. Yeah, and he has. And that's the whole thing. It's like there's only so much.
But the whole point is for a team that has been in the play-in tournament for 2 years in a row.
Right.
So like that's closer to what the Phoenix Suns, like there's there's the Phoenix Suns version of this too, where you get your 3 stars and 0 depth and it doesn't work. Right. Exactly. So if you're going to pay it, you better be damn sure that the team's going to be worth it. And the stars that you have under contract are going to be worth it. And that's the other thing, is if you give Jimmy Butler this extension, is he going to be worth it 2 or 3 years from now?
Yes.
When you're up against the second tax and you have Bam's contract rising and all these other things happening, it's a lot of math that Andy Ellsberg in this front office has to deal with, and quite frankly, and we're not equipped to do it, but that's what they get paid to do, and it's really hard to figure out, and it's why everybody who knows stuff is telling you keep an eye on the Jimmy Butler situation, and it's why I'm skeptical of his future in Miami. I gotta see it. If he's gonna give up money, I gotta see it before I believe it. Because I'm not getting snaked. I'm not getting roped into this thing where I'm like, there's no way Dwayne Wade's leaving. I'm not getting roped into this again. I'm jaded, man. People don't know how I grew up. I grew up a Dolphins fan. I'll never believe anything good will ever happen to any of my teams. I grew up a Marlins fan. We won World Series and then blew the teams up.
Twice.
Yeah, twice.
And
now look
twice
at
in
us.
a 6-year span. Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. And then you make the playoffs, and the next thing you know, you're sniffing, 40 wins on the season. I don't know.
Let's get to
something ridiculous.
Let's get to some mailbag questions after this.
You might struggle with your fandom, but one thing you never have to worry about is our good friends over at Monopoly Go. That's a classic game that's been a steady, positive influence on our culture for years, and now they're even better. because you know what? You got
Monopoly
to talk
culture.
about Monopoly Go. You got to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on a play. You've already talked about it, but guess what? There's just so much good stuff in this game. If you love the classic version of Monopoly, you're going to love Monopoly Go even more. You can team up with friends for time tournaments where you can work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, from unique stickers you can trade, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's a ton to include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win, or even rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So go get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Let's hit a couple of mailbag questions really quick. First one comes from Kyle. Is this the summer that the Heat pivot away from Jimmy's timeline towards Bam's, or does that depend on Jimmy's extension talks or some other factor? I got news for you. That already happened.
Yeah.
That happened. The last summer, the last offseason where the Heat operated with Jimmy Butler's timeline as the top priority was the summer of 2021 when they acquired Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker.
Correct.
Ever since then, this roster has gotten younger, and they've been reluctant to part with young players and draft picks. Everything has been geared towards Bam's timeline. Now, it's great if you're able to toe the line and kind of do both, right? But you look at the age of the guys on this roster, right? Bam's 26, Tyler's 24 or whatever, Jaime's 23, Nico's 20, Duncan Robinson's 30, but he's like a young 30. Terry Rozier's 30, and you might look at that as like, well, he's 30 years old. But they got 8 years younger at that position when they traded Kyle Lowry for him. So that was as much a youth move as a talent upgrade move. So yeah, this team has been operating with Bam's timeline in mind for the last 2 summers. It's also why they were a little reluctant to not part with everything for Damian Lillard, who was going to be 33 years old. So
yeah, that pursuit of Lillard though is why I don't necessarily agree with that perspective. Your take on that, because I think they're still kind of operating under this dual timeline. They've been in flux. I've said it so many times, and I hate to sound like I've been repeating it. It's just I think everything really got thrown off kilter in 2019 when they were acquiring what they thought was going to be a mid-level player, like a really good player in Jimmy Butler, and they got really, really good, and they advanced a lot deeper and a lot further in the Orlando bubble than they expected to, and that opened up a title window that they didn't expect to happen. I remember Bam started his first season in 2019. Before that, there was 2 years of him backing up Hassan Whiteside, which seems almost impossible to consider, but that's the reality. He was the second string center on this team behind Hassan. And then they got all of a sudden the Tyler Herro. He wound up being this really good rookie. And you got contributions from guys across the board. Goran Dragic wound up playing really, really solid, et cetera. So they've been operating with these strange timeline conflicts for the past 4 years.
Would you not agree that if you're operating on a 2 timeline, you're basically operating on the future one, the younger one? Because either you're going all in on both. Now, you're going all in, or you're not, both. Right?
No, I think they went all in or they wanted to go all in last year with Lillard.
Right.
It just didn't work out that way. If they had won a title,
they were reluctant to trade everything for Lillard, and maybe that was just a contract thing or whatever it was. But
sure,
I do think I think it is both. You're right. We're kind of saying the same thing, but I think the last year where it was only Jimmy's timeline and it wasn't so much thinking about the future is when they traded Precious Achiuwa and Dragic for Kyle Lowry and then signed PJ Tucker to a larger than market contract. So ever since then, they have been towing the line. So
to answer that question, then I think if the contract extension negotiations get as hairy as they might, and they wind up making that ultimate decision of having to trade Jimmy or not extending him, then I think that's a conscious decision within the front office that says, look, we don't know how much longer Jimmy will be in a Heat uniform, and we have to start considering Bam and building a team around him, because that is a huge concern. And that's what I've got too. It's like, Heat fans have tended to be very entitled since 2010. The idea that every superstar is just like, oh, you know what? I'm going to come to Miami. Guess what? It hasn't worked out that way, and it might. At some point, Bam Adebayo, who's a very popular player with a lot of friends around the league, might not care about being the centerpiece of Heat culture or the building block or whatever you might want to call it, and he might want to go somewhere else. Like, again, Heat fans are expecting like all these players, superstar players like Mitchell, KD, etc., to just say, "I want to come to Miami." Yeah, Miami's a great place to live, whatever. But guess what? At some point, Bam might flip the script a little bit and say, "You know what? I want to play elsewhere," because he and his legacy is going to be defined by a title and title contention in a
These
way
next
that
few years are pivotal, right? I
very
mean,
telling,
especially if you,
very
and
telling.
that's why I think the team is reluctant to move past the Jimmy Butler era, is because you
Mhm.
know that if you have Jimmy and you have Bam, then you have a chance, and or at least you have had a chance. And my argument is, you need to do something more now to
Right.
get
The
yourself to
chance isn't good
reopen that
enough.
window. How do you do that is a whole separate question. But my argument is that something has to happen here, and I don't know what that thing is, but Bam's the franchise player. He's the guy. He's your team captain. He is he is the first player everybody talks about in that organization. He's the guy. You're building
Right.
around him because he's also not going to be 35 years old next year. He's entering his prime. And he's the guy that stars do want to play with because they know if they show up in Miami that they could be the next Jimmy Butler, because Bam's not going to take that from them. Bam
Mhm.
doesn't want to be the number one scorer on this team, and he shouldn't have to be. He's the number one defender on this team. He lifts everything on that end of the floor, and then also gives you 20 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists a game. Like, it's so I don't know. I think that we are, and Woj already reported this, that when the Heat are looking for stars this summer, it's going to be people who align more with Bam's timeline, and that makes sense because they're younger, and you want to sort of start preparing for what that next thing is. All right, I think we could just end it there. We could save some of these mailbag questions maybe for another
Ooh.
show.
All right.
All right. That'll do it for us today. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.